Welcome to Bell Brothers Brewing,
Engineers talking about beers.
and today we're making some beers.
All right, so today, let's see. So this one is another installment of the B3 Brew for July, and July's theme is international pale lagers or pale lagers as a whole. So Cody, let's go into what is an international pale lager according to the BJCP guidelines.
All right, so it's a 2A, because that means so much to everybody. Overall impression is a highly attenuated pale lager without strong flavors, typically well balanced and highly carbonated. Served cold, it is refreshing and thirst quenching. Hence why we have it as the July beer.
Right? Yeah.
Hot summer calls for a nice thirst quenchy beer. It's the quenchiest.
It's the quenchiest. Thanks, Saka. Or should I say Soka?
Soka.
Served
ding dong.
Right. So the well-balanced, highly carbonated. I mean, this is like the champagne of beers, right?
I'm pretty sure that does fall into something that would be in this category. Let's see here. We'll go to mouthfeel. Light to medium body, moderate high to highly carbonated. Can have a slight carbonic bite. So yeah, make it bubbly.
And served cold, that's traditional, right? That's why like Coors and Bud and those kinds of beers are always like ice cold. That's super chilled. Is that the idea is that the coldness really lets I would say it makes it more thirst quenching, right? Lets the light body shine through. And would you say it enhances, we'll call it the bitterness of the quote unquote bitterness of the light hopping?
I don't know if it would quite enhance bitterness. It definitely reduces any malt flavors. Like having a colder beer will have a lot less malt noticeability. As it warms up, the malt will come out more. So it might enhance the hoppiness just by reducing the maltiness.
Gotcha.
In the sense that those are like inverse sliders, if maltiness goes down, hoppiness must go up.
So I also want to point out appearance. Appearance is pale straw to gold color, white, frothy head. May not last long. That's because we're using potentially adjuncts in there. There's not going to be a lot of starches or proteins because we're not doing wheat. We're not really
light body.
Light bodied beer. There's nothing to really hold the foam up, right? So we're expecting to see that, while we pour it, it's like really foamy and then just gone, immediately. Let's look at how this style compares to other styles.
So style comparison is generally more bitter and filling than an American lager, less hoppy and bitter than a German Pils, less body, malt flavor, and hop character than a Czech premium pale lager. More robust versions can approach a Munich Helles in flavor, although with more of an adjunct quality. And adjuncts are anything that are not malt going into your mash, for people who don't know.
No, that's perfect. And less hoppy and bitter than a German Pils. So, I mean, German Pils, they got some hoppy. I mean, they are bitter typically, which is really nice.
Yeah.
So we're going to back off of that, but we're more than your American lagers, right? So we're going to be a little more bitter than your Budweisers, your Coors, your Michelobs, those kinds of deals.
Grumpy Cat, you were done. Lost.
All right, and so we've got characteristic ingredients. What do we got in there, Cody? Why is this interesting?
So characteristic ingredients are 2 or 6 row barley. May use rice, corn, or sugar as adjuncts, or could be all malt. So it's not interesting.
Well, no, I think it would be really cool to use some corn in one of our beers because we really haven't explored that capability yet. So since we're doing experimentals, I say let's do some flaked corn or some pressed corn in our beer.
Okay, I'm up for that. Do a little flaked corn just to give it a little extra, kick.
Yeah, well, and we can get some extra kick, get some flavors out of that maybe. So let's jump over to vitals.
So IBUs are 18 to 25.
So we're less than our American Pale Ale, right? Even the lower end of the American Pale Ale, right?
Yes, this is a very low bitterness style.
That feels really tight to me too. Only what, 7 points? Seven
Yeah,
IBUs?
7 points.
Wow, that's really like a thin category.
Well, I think it's because you would start abutting the amber lager. If you look at the amber lagers, you've got 8 to 25 there as well. So I think if you go too low on it, it's, where do you draw the line between an international pale lager and an amber lager? If the colors, because I'm sure the colors overlap a little bit when you look at like
International
appearance.
ambers. No,
gold amber to reddish copper. SRM is 2 to 6, 7 to 14. Okay, so no, they don't overlap at all.
They don't overlap at all. It is truly a hard line between those two. Like, nope, it is here and here, and thou shalt not cover or go between those two pieces.
Yeah, so maybe it's just a. I mean, these are sort of, I don't want to call them junk categories, but there's like they marked out other things that were, German pills, Czech premium, and all these other styles around it, and then said everything that doesn't fall into those is going to be international pale.
Pale lagers.
So I think that's why the IBUs, maybe that's the better reason for why the IBU range is so tight, is that they were trying to like specifically scissor out a section in between all of the other domestic lager types that already exist.
Well, you can see some of that when we shift over to the ABV, right? Because it's 4.6 to 6.0, which 6% ABV. I mean, in a light lager or in a pale lager, like that seems like strong beer right there. I mean, that's a good way to get like fusel alcohols or to have something. I mean, although maybe because the adjuncts, right? Like free bump of the ABV, because your adjuncts basically give nothing but ABV, free sugars to the yeast versus actual flavor.
Yeah, as long as you're careful with it, and you're lagering, so you're not going to get too many of those. Like, if you do your lagering properly, there shouldn't be any fusel alcohols or DMS or diacetyl or anything like that, because it won't have any of those high temperature fermentation products.
Right. So then we're looking at our OG and FG, which apply directly. So that's original gravity and final gravity. And that was marked over, that's kind of how we're going to get that ABV ratio or the percentages, right? So we've got 1.042 to 1.05. Wow, that's like that's a very limiting factor there.
Yeah.
But then the final gravity's got a bit more of a range into a 1.008 and 1.012. So that one's a little wider than what I would.
That's 0.004 points.
Okay.
That's pretty tight.
Yeah. So I wonder how they get like such a wide range of ABV if their original and final gravities are so freaking tight.
Like, I mean, I guess if you go to the top end of the original gravity and the bottom end of the final gravity, you might maybe squeak out 6% out of that.
You might. Yeah, it's real tight 6. All right. I thought this was very interesting. So I'm looking at your guidelines here. The history, right? In the United States, developed as a premium version of the standard American lager with a similar history outside of the United States, developed either as an imitation of the American light lagers or as a more accessible and often drier and less bitter version of the Pilsner type beer, often heavily marketed and exported as a lager industrial or multinational brew or by multinational brewers. So so Americans started it, I guess, right? The American lager, and then the international community was like, that's a great idea. Let's go do that. And everybody freaking blew up all over the place and they're doing it. I mean, like Mexican light lagers or Mexican lagers are all over the place. So let's go over and look at ingredients now that we have an understanding of what the style is, kind of. So we've got a recipe, the B3 International Lager, very nice. Let's open up style. I want to see just to see how far off or close we get, when we do the style. So our 2B or 2A.
2A.
There we go, 2A. Boil time 60 minutes, 75% efficiency. Batch size is 5. Post 5.5.
Yep.
Up one more. Batch size fermenter.
It's already set 5.5.
No, we put that as 5 last time.
5.
All right. So 2-row, or do we want to go 6-row?
If we're gonna use corn, I think we should go 6-row here.
6-row. Let's play. This will be a first time for the Bell Brothers too. I don't think we've actually gone into 6-row. So 6-row, like we talked about in the last B3 brew, has got more diastatic power to it. That DP mark on there. And the diastatic power is the amount of enzymes and the amount of expected enzymatic activity we're going to get when we move into the mash. So as we hit those really nice mash temperatures, we're really hoping to get those alpha and beta amylase enzymes out there that are going to burn those starches down to fermentable sugars, right?
Yep.
And so the whole point here is to come in and bring in flaked corn. There you go. To really kind of pump up the amount of diastatic mashing that we're going to have, right? The diastatic and enzymatic activity we're going to have in the mash. So really convert everything we can, because that's the only way we're going to get to that original gravity of 1.008, right? Like there's no effing way we're getting down to that unless we really pump up the simple sugars that we're going to have coming out the other side of this, right?
Yep. All right. So let's see. I put 6 and 3 is where I was thinking. Puts us at the upper end of the original gravity, almost exactly at 1.05. That's
pretty good. I mean, the ABV is a little low, but maybe that's just what's
in range.
Yeah.
4 to ABV is 4.6 to 6. So we're right on that. And it's assuming a final gravity at
which I think we can do better than
1.2.
that.
So if we do better than that, it'll bring up our ABV, but that's top end of the range for both OG and FG for the style.
Yeah. So next up, we're going to do hops, right?
Yep.
Flaked corn, American 6-row. Do we go American or German noble? I know we typically enjoy more of an international style.
Mm-hmm.
We're going to have some American brands. We only really need bittering hop, right? I mean, honestly, it's just bitterness. It's not really that we're adding too much flavoring.
There shouldn't be much in the way of flavor. It should be pretty much just bitter. So we might not even be able to use an American hop unless you want to talk like a half ounce of a really low end or of a lower end American style hop.
Right. Yeah, I was thinking something more in the something out of Washington State, like a Columbus, or think Magnum. American Noble in its own way. There you go, like a Magnum. There you go, Magnum. Oh, Jesus Christ.
We would have to do like half an ounce of Magnum, I think, would give us about what we're looking for.
You think so?
Oil for 60 minutes.
And then change it to pellet.
Yep. Pellets. So it's a little too strong, actually.
Yeah, that's a little outside of style, I think.
Yeah, 25 is our top end of that range.
So yeah, that's a bit high on that one. So let's cut back on the alpha acid on that. Change it to a different. And let's change to 1 ounce. That way we just buy like one packet.
Yeah, so we're not stuck with half a packet.
Yeah, which is kind of dumb.
We could do some
Goldings.
So let's see. We used to use the straight Goldings.
Kent Golding. I think we find Kent Golding. I don't think we can get straight Kent Golding. We can't. Or we can get EKG, right? East Kent Golding, but that's European.
Yeah, it's a British hop, but it does give us exactly what we're looking for. I mean, we're not going to be able to taste it. It's a bitterness hop. It'll go away.
Yeah, true. Oh, change the whole leaf to pellet again.
Yeah. Once you've boiled it for 60 minutes, you're not going to taste it.
Right. There we go. 21. Yeah. So, I mean, that's a higher side of it, but I think it's almost like smack in the middle. I mean, but 18 to 25, right? So, I mean,
it's pretty close in the middle.
I think that's good. I'm happy with that.
I think it's a good place. Yeah. I'm happy with that one. 1 ounce of East Kent Goldings. It's nice, it's simple. Should give us a good bitterness, but without there won't be any other flavors. It'll just be clean, good bitterness.
So let's duck down to our mash guidelines, right? So we're going to talk about mash, because this beer. Go ahead and go ahead, you get your setups on that one. So this beer in general is because it's very light. There's not a lot going on. The mash is going to be like really important. It is the aspect that is going to create the beer itself, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because I mean the hop profile, right? Single beer or single hop, nothing there.
Yeah.
The mash, right? Very 6-row and corn. So if you screw up, say the body, right? In mash, then you're basically hosed. Like you're wasting your time, right? Like if you do a full body beer, it's all about converting these sugars or converting the starches to sugars in the mash. Period. I think temperature, we're 148 actually. We should be on light and 75 minutes.
148.
Yep. Yeah, that's the lowest end of what's
then
going
let's see,
on
20 above that is be 168. It's probably where we're going to need to start with our water temperature.
Type is infusion, right?
Yeah. Fusion.
And then we're going to sparge.
We will
fly sparge.
And we're going to fly sparge probably about, we need 4 gallons.
Yeah, there you go. About 4.2 gallons apparently. And so in our fly sparge, if you watch our last B3 brew, we talked about that. Our fly sparge is where we take water from our hot liquor tank and we move it into our mash tun on top so that the lighter fluids of the clean water press down on the heavier fluids of
the mash or the wort. Pushes down on the wort, and the difference in density will slowly move them through, and you'll get as much as much of the sugars cleaned off of your mash, the grains and everything else will get cleaned out, and you'll get as much of your sugar as possible into your final brew, so we can hopefully hit that nice original gravity number of 1.05.
Exactly. So we're fly sparging with the original amount of mash, which is 13 quarts. I think, so the reason why we've also only got 13 quarts in our original mash is that you want the mash to stay kind of, you don't want it liquid, right?
Yeah, there's a proper thickness. There's an amount of grain to water ratio that works best for getting your enzymes to move enough to contact all of your starches to convert them to sugars. But if it's too much liquid, the mean path, like the distance the enzyme has to travel, is too far for it to find a starch. So that slows it down. And if there's not enough liquid, then it can't get anywhere because there's so much stuff in its way. So you have to have enough liquid to solid ratio so that the enzymes can move freely and do their job, but not that the starches are so separate from one another that the enzymes can't get there.
Oh, all right. And that's exactly why you set the starting mash thickness to 1.75 quarts per pound. And then I think you calculated the 13 quarts, or did it just give it to you at that point?
I calculated that. I just did it in my head real quick while I was sitting here. It was like, all right, so 1 is going to be 9, and I need 3/4 of 9. That doesn't divide nicely because it's 27 fourths. And I was like, well, that's going to be somewhere in the range of 3. So I just called, or 3 or 4. So I just called it 14. It was like close, or 4, and added that to 9 and got 13. It was like, that'll be close enough. Moving on.
That's fine. Cool. All right. So we've got that aspect of it. That's done.
Yep. And we've got our total volume we're looking for there too.
Yeah, exactly. We pull what we need to the boil. Move to yeast next.
Yeast.
And this is going to be a Bell Brothers B3 first time lager yeast. Are we actually going to lager this sucker?
I would like to. Well, let's just start with WLP. Right. Do you want to go to the White Labs website and look through what they think is the right?
Other than their American lager yeast?
Okay, yeah, that sounds pretty.
This seems pretty straightforward to me.
It does seem pretty straightforward. We'll just go with the
one packet. We're going to use the wet yeast, right? We like the liquid yeast rather than the dry yeast. Yeah, I think we need a pretty heavy pro brewer.
We want a big pitch. I'm going to do a 2 liter. Probably do a full 2 liter, even though this is usually I wouldn't use a 2 liter starter on 9 pounds of fermentables because it is a lager. You have to pitch harder to make it work. So I'm going to go ahead and do a 2 liter starter for this guy to make sure that we have a lot of cells to really get the job done.
Fermentation temperature, you want to throw that one, let's say we want it, I don't know, 52, something like that, right smack in the middle of the optimum temperature. That way,
it's probably a good place.
Our fermentation chamber, right, the temperature control chamber is decent, but you're going to have some, you're going to have some give and take. What's that? There's a terminology for the standard deviation away from, but that's not the standard deviation. There's a boundary around it.
Yeah, it's got a range. It's got a variance, and around that variance is its range of what it's going to hit from either side.
So if we set the temperature at 52 degrees, right, there's a variance of probably plus or minus 2 degrees around it that we're going to be floating in there while the cold the chest freezer is trying to cool it down, or the heating blanket is bringing it up. And so if we aim for the middle, then chances are we won't go too much lower than 50, and we won't go much hotter than 55 at any one point in time.
Yeah, that should work out pretty well for us.
I agree. Let's see. All right, so I think at this point it's time to bump over to water chemistry.
Yep.
So where we're at.
And yeah, so for a comparison in water chemistry, if Zoom would get out of my way, I have our Wayward Sun Munich Helles brew sheet up here. And I was just going to use the values from that across the board to do this one.
It's built really for good yeast health and propagation, right? Is to give it as much as it needs to really crank along, because we're not putting a whole lot of adjuncts in here. So there's like the 6-row, which is good base, but I think we're going to have a problem. So lots of enzymatic activity, but not a lot of like minerals and whatnot. And then there's also a pretty heavy lacking in lactic, right? Yeah, there's no acidity.
7.26 lactic to get this one done.
Right.
So let's see. Let's put in other ingredients. We're going to do lactic acid.
And that helps our pH come grams. It's the top. It's above ounces. We did this last time.
Yeah. That is going to be
7.26. And again, that's a little dribble in the bottom. It seems like a whole lot, but it ain't. That's in the mash. Yep. Water. Yeah, water. It's set properly.
Right, cool.
Yeah.
And then we're going to do
calcium chloride. Yep. And hydrate.
Anhydrous. And we are going to need 2.5
grams. Otherwise, it just is a unit conversion for you. Can you imagine doing this in kilograms? Jeez, that would be horrible.
I mean, if we do a 1,000 times larger brew, they'll be easy squeezy.
Right. So we add another one. I also saw Epsom salts. Yeah. I think it was 2 grams, something like that.
2 grams of Epsom salt.
2 grams Epsoms.
Switch that. Move that first. 2.0 grams of Epsom salt.
And
we need
gypsum right there above you. Yep.
Gypsum.
Grams.
That was what?
0.5.
Yeah.
Or is that
half
1?
gram.
Half gram. And we do table salt too. So table salt is rather an interesting addition as well to the ingredients. So beyond just your basic health and wellness, right? Table salt has been shown to give like a crispness, a clean finish to the malt character. So rather than like lingering sweetness, it'll help kind of clean and sharpen that aspect, right?
Yep.
So the rest of it's really in there for enhancing our water. And you can really see that how much we've added now compared to our last B3 brew, right? Where there's just a whole ton of water chemistry in this one because of, well, I say a whole ton, right? I mean, it's still a little like drop on the bottom of the
yeah, let's say we're looking at 6 grams of
I mean, it's not
6 grams of salt and 7.5 grams or 7.25 grams of lactic acid.
But it's more complex than we did previously because we're looking for a balance, right? We're not trying to enhance the bitterness. We're not trying to enhance the malt character. We're just trying to give enough ingredients in there to let the yeast propagate appropriately. Propagation is the multiple creating more and more yeast cells, right? They've got to split. So you want to propagate appropriately, because if they don't propagate cleanly with enough nutrients, then we can get off flavors, right?
Yeah, and we won't hit our final gravity that we're aiming for.
Yeah, and they're less efficient. Hey, let's actually come down now because I think you changed the lager style.
Adding in the lager styles, getting our adding everything in, it slowly figured out that we were going to get a better final gravity than it was expecting.
And let's see, so we've done IBUs. We talked about that, right? International Bitterness Unit, 21, almost 22, 21 and a half, right? So really low. I have a graphic on that one. I put that one up. SRM, right, is the standard reference measurement, strangely enough, right, to 1 centimeter of liquid. I looked that up, and it's also in our video. So that is the color, right? So this one, obviously, a pale lager should be, pale. It's a pale yellow, right? So we're looking for really light, especially with just corn and 6-row. We should have nothing. There should be.
We added in a 1.8 lava bond and a 0.05 lava bond.
Right. And lava bond. So you want to talk about lava bond? Is that? I mean, yeah. Tell me, what is Lava Bond?
Lava Bond was an older style of doing the color. It's a little less precise than the SRM method, but we still use it because it's a decent way of communicating to somebody how dark this product is. So 1.8 is very low. Lava Bond caps out at about 500, which is a burnt to dark black roasted malt.
Right.
So on a scale of 0 to 500, we have a 1.8 and a 0.5. So these are very light.
I think Lava Bond still holds for grain. Like when you're talking about malts, I think it's easier because there's such a wider range of what's going on, and it's more about how much roast went into that grain, right? That malt. Whereas like SRM is a liquid, right? It's a refraction of blue light through 1 centimeter of liquid. Well, it's really hard to tell you that at a 6-row malt, a solid object, right, has an SRM of whatever.
Yeah.
Like, that doesn't make sense, right?
It doesn't really work.
Logically, it doesn't connect.
Yeah. Well, and in a big way, your SRM would vary. So if I told the thing that we were going to end our boil at 2 gallons, that SRM would go up,
right?
Because it's a much thicker liquid. The SRM would change.
Your dilution of the liquid, right, of the solution.
Yeah.
They're diluting one way, right, or not diluting, right? But with the essence, efficiency,
you have the same amount of sugar.
You
have the same amount of extracted sugars, and depending on how much liquid you put that into, it will change the SRM around.
Right.
So I think that's the other reason you end up using Lava Bond when you're talking about malt, is that Lava Bond communicates how dark the malt is. SRM communicates how dark your liquid is, and it's not the same thing.
Exactly. There you go.
Because you can vary the darkness of a liquid by fiddling with how much water you put in it. If I take a stout and add a bunch of water to it, it'll be lighter.
Yeah. You can kind of get to an amber.
Yeah. I can turn a stout into an amber by just pouring enough water into it.
Right.
Or just make it look the same.
I don't think there's anything else on this. I think it's most of our recipe side. I'm pretty happy with this one.
I think so. This should be a good, interesting brew.
Well, and it's going to take, 2 weeks for us to lager it, and then another week. Do you think we'll probably need secondary, or something, since it's already going to be kind of cold? You might be able to cold crash in primary towards the end of the second week.
That was my plan, is to run through the whole the primary fermentation, let it do its thing, and then at the end, drop it down to like 40 degrees, let all the yeast sediment out. Probably give it 2 days at 40, since it is a more cold tolerant yeast. It'll take a little more time. And also, like, the sparkling clarity is really important to making this style work, I think. Right. So I really want to push to get a nice, clear look when we finish this one. Yeah.
All right.
I like this one. I think it'll work out well.
This should be a really interesting first experiment. So everybody, thanks for watching our video on this one. We're going to jump to the tasting next. You're going to see us crank through, and you'll find out whether or not the B3, the Bell Brothers' first American lager ever, both lagering and light beer, international lager, would be successful or a shit show.
It's been 3 weeks. Right? 3 weeks? 4 weeks? 4 weeks. A whole month now, and we finally have the lager.
That's because it takes 2 weeks in primary to get a lager right, and depending on who you talk to, between 2 and 6 weeks to do secondary. We did about a week in secondary, and then a week conditioning in the keg to make sure we got a nice, bubbly, frothy, good one.
Right?
So let's take a look.
And I tried to burst carbonate it a little bit.
It looks beautiful.
Look at that. Yeah,
nice, clear.
So, good clarity. I'm really happy with the clarity and the color on that. Nice light gold. I mean, that's what I expect to see. I think I got the carbonation properly.
Looks pretty good.
It's sitting there carbonated.
It's pretty effervescent. It looks like soda.
Soda, yeah.
Looks like soda. Smells gently malty.
Really? I was thinking a little grassy, a little green apple. Like it's got a little acetaldehyde to it, which is about right for the style.
Yeah,
right?
A little acetaldehyde, a little green apple.
It's the way it's supposed to be.
Coors,
yeah. This is our Coors remake.
I almost want to grab a Coors Light side by side to smell it, and like, because it does have that light green apple, a hint of grassy, which is exactly what you expect out of Coors.
Well, I think having Coors Light in mixture would be incorrect. I think Coors Natural, right?
Yeah,
like the original classic would be better, because Coors Light, right, is obviously reduced the alcohol or reduced the calories, right? And so you're really going to take a hit, I think, from the flavor in the body and all that stuff. We're going to kick the pants off of that easily. But if instead we decided to go against like a Coors, I think it'd be a better call.
I can see that. Let's give it a taste.
Yeah. Pretty clean. There's a little bit of the acetaldehyde, I think it comes in on the flavor.
Green apple.
So yeah, I'm picking up kind of like the green Jolly Rancher, green apple kind of aspect of it. But the flavors, like the lagering, I think is really clean. I don't taste any weird off flavors or infections.
Yeah, you can taste a little bit of the corn.
Yes.
That we used. I can taste a little corniness. It took me a second to place it because I'm not used to corn in my beer. I was like, I don't recognize this flavor. It's a little bit of corn. So there's a hint of corn in there, and
I think I could add a little bit more carbonation to it. I think it's not like, well, it's visually carbonated. I think it could use like a little bit more sparkling, a little more carbonic bite, I think, to the flavor, to the palate.
Yeah, I think that would really help. Yeah. You can taste the carbonic bite, which I think is good. I think that enhanced it. I tasted at a secondary without any carbonation, and it's definitely better. The little bit of zing that it brings a brightness. There you go. Good. A little bit of the carbonation, making that carbonic acid, gave it just a little bit of a bright zing to it to really help balance or brighten it, because it was really dull prior to being carbonated, in my opinion.
Yeah, I think it's really good for our first pass lager. I'm really pleased with it. Right, there's that minute. I think what's difficult about lagers as a whole, right, is that the flavors are always very delicate. You're always looking for just that little bit of green apple or that little bit of corn that comes into it. There's a little bit of grassy, malty, the Pilsen malt that comes through. And so playing with those really delicate balances, getting the water chemistry right so that it doesn't bounce one way or another, you're not getting any one real note, I think is very difficult. The hops on this balance really well. I'm not really picking up necessarily a hot flavor or aroma necessarily.
There's just a gentle bitterness.
Just the bitterness hanging out behind. I think that's the key to a really good, clean American lager, right? Is that it just kind of sings a little bit behind it, right? So I'm really like this. So let's go to the beer. I'm gonna give this one for style, like personally enjoyability and the impression of the aspect I like about this. My beer score, like a 7, 8.
Yeah. For style, I'll give it a 7 or 8. If you watched the International Pale Lager video, you know that a well-made pale lager gets a firm 5.
Yeah, but I mean, in the sense of like, is it enjoyable to drink? Like for me, anyways, I don't mind drinking this, and the fact that we homebrewed it and we like beat like, if you didn't tell me this was one of ours, and you were like pouring Coors, right, or Bud, or fucking Pabst for that matter, right? I would be like, yeah, this plays in that same ballgame. I don't taste any weird off flavors. I don't taste any issues with what's going on. It was done properly. And I'd be like, yeah, this is a commercial brewer that's kicking out what they need to be kicking out. So I'm really impressed with it.
Yeah, well, yeah, I don't doubt. We did a great job. It's just a great job of making a beer that's intentionally meh.
I think it could have, I mean, maybe a little bit more. We could figure out, like, to improve the process a little bit more. Honestly, I think this hits dead on to what those people are like, what the drinkers, these kinds of drinkers.
I think this is exactly what it was supposed to be.
Yeah, and so I think this would be a great addition to our flagships of one form to kind of put that, like, in the background. I know we had, like, our list of flagships away, you know, a couple of years ago, right, all big, pumped up. But I think, honestly, as we've come further down the line, I think this would be a really good guy to come in and say, somebody's like, I drink Coors, and you're like, bam, here you go. They, you know, and they'll be like, oh shit, you know, you're like, yeah, you like the stuff, right? Like, I think this matches perfect. I really like that.
I agree with that.
All right, so we're gonna play around with this one. I think we need to revisit this recipe and this process a couple of times. Maybe not something necessarily in the brew schedule, because those are quick and hard, and I'd like to let this one kind of ride out a little longer. But I'm happy with it. You happy with it?
I'm very happy with it.
Fantastic. Well, I think that closes out our B3 Brew. Hopefully you've enjoyed the B3 Brew and seeing the Bell Brothers work on our first American lager. This has been Bell Brothers Brewing.
Engineers talking about beers.
Cheers.